The 33,000-foot miracle. A flight attendant survived a 6-mile fall without a parachute when her plane exploded at 33,000 feet in 1972. Vesna Vulović was working aboard JAT Flight 367 when a briefcase bomb detonated over Czechoslovakia. The DC-9 disintegrated midair, killing all 27 passengers and crew, except Vulović. She remained strapped to her seat with a section of fuselage, creating a protective shell during her fall. She landed in deep snow on a steep mountainside that absorbed the impact. Former World War II medic Bruno Henke found her barely alive, with a fractured skull and broken vertebrae. Doctors placed Vulović in a coma for 27 days. She remained paralyzed for 10 months before recovering. The Guinness Book of World Records certified her survival as the highest fall without a parachute ever survived.
Amazon jungle teen survivor. A 17-year-old girl became the sole survivor of a plane crash that killed 91 people, then walked alone through the Amazon for 11 days with only candy. Julianne Kepka was flying with her mother on Christmas Eve, 1971, when Lanza Flight 508 was struck by lightning and broke apart at 10,000 feet over the Peruvian rainforest. Kepka fell strapped to her seat, with jungle canopy breaking her fall across multiple tree branches. She awoke with a broken collarbone, deep cuts, and one eye swollen shut. Her biologist mother had taught her survival skills, including following water downstream to find civilization. For 11 days, she followed streams through the rainforest, eating candy from plane wreckage and drinking stream water. She removed maggots from infected wounds using gasoline found at an abandoned lumber camp. Loggers discovered her on January 3, 1972, making her one of only 14 known sole survivors of commercial aviation disasters. The bear attack crawl. A fur trapper survived a grizzly bear mauling that broke his leg and ribs, then crawled 200 miles to safety over 6 weeks in 1823. Hugh Glass was part of Andrew Henry's fur expedition in South Dakota when he surprised a grizzly bear with cubs. The bear mauled Glass so severely that his companions were convinced he would die within hours. Henry's men dug a shallow grave and waited 2 days before taking his rifle, knife, and belongings, leaving him unconscious. Glass regained consciousness abandoned, with infected wounds and a broken leg. He set his leg using dead log pieces as a splint and began crawling toward Fort Kiowa, 200 miles away. Glass survived by eating berries, roots, and carrion scavenged from wolf kills, sometimes driving away wolves to claim their prey. He crawled for 6 weeks, covering 5 miles daily, until reaching the fort in October 1823. The story inspired The Revenant, though Glass forgave his abandoners and continued trapping. The 127-hour amputation. A mountaineer cut off his own arm with a dull knife after a boulder pinned his forearm for 127 hours in a remote Utah canyon. Aaron Ralston was canyoneering alone in Blue John Canyon in 2003 when he dislodged an 800-pound boulder that trapped his arm. He had told no one his hiking plans and carried minimal supplies. For 5 days, Ralston tried freeing his arm by chipping at the boulder and rigging pulley systems with climbing ropes. By day 5, dehydration and delirium convinced him amputation was his only survival chance. He broke his radius and ulna bones by torquing his arm against the boulder, then cut through muscle, tendons, and nerves over an hour. After freeing himself, Ralston rappelled down a 65-foot cliff and hiked 8 miles before encountering hikers who called rescue. Surgeons completed the amputation at a hospital. Ralston returned to mountaineering with a prosthetic arm, with his story adapted into 127 hours. 72 days of cannibalism. Rugby team survivors ate the flesh of their dead teammates after their plane crashed in the Andes and rescue teams abandoned the search. Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 crashed into a glacier at 12,000 feet on October 13, 1972, carrying team members and families to a match in Chile. The impact killed 12 people immediately, with 5 more dying overnight. Survivors initially rationed chocolate and wine from the plane, but supplies lasted only 8 days in freezing conditions. Facing starvation, medical student Roberto Canessa convinced the group that eating the preserved flesh of crash victims was their only chance. They used razor blades and glass shards to harvest meat from bodies naturally frozen by mountain temperatures. An avalanche on day 17 buried the fuselage and killed 8 more survivors, leaving only 16 alive. After 72 days, Roberto Canessa and Nando Parado hiked for 10 days across the Andes to reach Chilean authorities, who rescued the remaining 14 survivors on December 23, 1972. The ice-cold resurrection. A radiologist survived being trapped under ice for 80 minutes, reaching the lowest body temperature ever recorded in a surviving human at 56.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Anna Bogenholm was skiing near Narvik, Norway in May 1999 when she fell through thin ice and became trapped head down under a frozen stream. Her colleagues tried desperately to free her, but could only reach her feet. Bogenholm found a small air pocket under the ice where she could breathe, but the 35 degrees Fahrenheit water quickly dropped her core body temperature below survivable levels. She lost consciousness after 40 minutes as hypothermia shut down her bodily functions. Rescue teams took over an hour to cut through the ice and extract her lifeless body. Doctors at University Hospital of North Norway used a heart-lung bypass machine to gradually rewarm her blood while performing CPR for 9 hours. Her body temperature rose slowly from 56.7 degrees Fahrenheit to normal levels, and incredibly, her brain activity returned with no permanent damage. Bogenholm made a complete recovery, proving extreme hypothermia can preserve brain function far longer than previously thought. 47 days adrift alone. An American bombardier survived 47 days on a life raft in the Pacific Ocean, then endured 2 years of brutal torture as a Japanese prisoner of war. Louis Zamperini was part of an Army Air Force's crew searching for a missing aircraft on May 27, 1943, when mechanical failure caused their plane to crash 850 miles south of Oahu. Only 3 of 11 crew survived, with 1 dying after 33 days at sea. Zamperini and pilot Russell Phillips drifted across 2,000 miles of Pacific Ocean on small life rafts, surviving on rainwater collected in canvas tarps and raw fish caught with hooks fashioned from safety pins. They fought off shark attacks by punching the animals and drove away Japanese bomber planes by lying flat in their rafts. After 47 days, they were captured by Japanese forces and taken to prisoner of war camps. Zamperini spent 2 years in Japanese POW camps, where guard Mutsuhiro Watanabe, known as the Bird, singled him out for brutal treatment. He endured daily beatings and psychological torture until Japan's surrender in August 1945. Atlantic crossing in 26 feet. A naval architect survived 76 days alone in a 6-foot inflatable life raft crossing the Atlantic Ocean using improvised fishing gear and solar stills. Stephen Callahan was sailing solo from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean in January 1982 when his 21-foot sloop was holed by what he believed was a whale collision, sinking in 10 minutes. Callahan crafted fishing spears from a knife lashed to an oar and learned to catch Dorado fish, which became his primary food source. He repaired dozens of punctures in his raft using a patch kit, often while being tossed by storm waves. His solar stills produced about a pint of fresh water per day from seawater, barely enough to prevent fatal dehydration. Trade winds and currents carried Callahan's raft 1,800 miles across the Atlantic before fishermen near Guadeloupe spotted him on April 20th, 1982. He had lost 1/3 of his body weight but suffered no permanent damage. Callahan's detailed survival account became Adrift, 76 Days Lost at Sea, and influenced modern life raft design. The impossible Alpine crawl. A British mountaineer crawled back to base camp with a shattered leg after his climbing partner cut the rope and left him for dead in a Peruvian glacier crevasse. Joe Simpson was descending Ciula Grande with Simon Yates in 1985 when Simpson fell and broke his tibia, fibula, and drove his knee joint up into his thigh bone. Yates lowered Simpson using climbing ropes but accidentally lowered him over a cliff edge. Unable to communicate and with Simpson's weight pulling him toward the cliff, Yates made the agonizing decision to cut the rope, assuming Simpson had died. Simpson survived the 100-foot drop into the crevasse, but found himself trapped on an ice ledge. He discovered a route deeper into the glacier that led to daylight and crawled out onto the mountain's base. With no food or water, Simpson crawled and hopped 3 miles back to base camp over 4 days, timing his movement to avoid pain. He reached camp just hours before Yates was scheduled to leave, having covered the distance by setting small goals and dragging himself 20 yards at a time. Simpson's story became Touching the Void. Space mission's greatest save. 3 Apollo astronauts survived a catastrophic oxygen tank explosion 200,000 miles from Earth by converting their lunar module into a lifeboat. James Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes were en route to the moon on April 13, 1970, when an electrical short circuit caused oxygen tank number 2 to explode, crippling their command module's power, water, and air systems. NASA engineers worked around the clock to devise survival procedures using only materials available on the spacecraft, including an improvised carbon dioxide filter made from plastic bags, cardboard, and duct tape. The crew powered down the command module and moved into the lunar module, designed to support 2 men for 2 days but had to sustain 3 men for 4 days. The astronauts endured freezing temperatures, severe dehydration, and dangerous carbon dioxide levels before successfully restarting the command module for re-entry on April 17, 1970. Their safe splashdown in the Pacific Ocean turned Apollo 13 from a failed moon mission into NASA's successful failure, proving human ingenuity could overcome impossible odds in space. 3 days in underwater darkness. A Nigerian ship's cook survived 3 days trapped in an air pocket 100 feet underwater after his tugboat capsized, breathing stale air in complete darkness while surrounded by corpses. Harrison Okene was in the bathroom of the Jascon 4 tugboat at 4:30 a.m. on May 26, 2013, when the vessel suddenly capsized during a routine mission off the Nigerian coast. Okene found himself in freezing water up to his neck, sharing the cramped 4-foot-high space with the bodies of his 11 deceased crewmates in complete darkness. The air pocket contained enough oxygen mixed with toxic gases to keep him barely alive, though he had no food or fresh water. He prayed continuously and drank his own urine to prevent fatal dehydration. On the 3rd day, South African divers searching for bodies discovered Okene moving in the wreckage and initially thought they had found another corpse. Divers fitted him with scuba gear and slowly brought him to the surface using decompression stops. Okene made a full recovery and became a certified commercial diver, crediting divine intervention for his 1 in a billion survival. The human lightning magnet. A Virginia park ranger survived being struck by lightning 7 separate times over 35 years, earning him the nickname Human Lightning Rod and a Guinness World Record. Roy Sullivan experienced his first lightning strike in 1942 while working in Shenandoah National Park, which burned a stripe down his leg and knocked off his big toenail. Lightning seemed to seek him out despite his attempts to avoid storms. Each lightning strike caused different injuries, including burned hair, scorched eyebrows, knocked off shoes, and burns across his chest and stomach. The 1972 strike set his hair on fire, while the 1973 incident burned his legs and knocked him unconscious. Sullivan began carrying a pitcher of water in his truck to douse flames after lightning strikes. Sullivan survived all 7 documented lightning strikes and continued working as a park ranger until retirement, though he became increasingly paranoid about thunderstorms. He died in 1983 from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, reportedly due to unrequited love rather than his lightning experiences. Scientists estimated the odds of being struck 7 times at 1 in 10 to the 25th power. Double atomic bomb survivor. A Japanese naval engineer survived both atomic bomb detonations in World War II, experiencing the Hiroshima blast at close range and then the Nagasaki bombing 3 days later. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was on a business trip to Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, when the Enola Gay dropped Little Boy just over a mile from his location. The blast ruptured his eardrums, temporarily blinded him, and left him with severe burns. Yamaguchi spent the night in a Hiroshima shelter, then took a train home to Nagasaki despite his injuries, arriving on August 8. The next morning, he reported to his job at Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and was describing the Hiroshima bombing to his supervisor when the second atomic bomb, Fat Man, detonated just over 2 miles away. Both of Yamaguchi's young children and his wife survived the Nagasaki blast, though his wife suffered radiation poisoning from searching for him in the aftermath. Yamaguchi recovered from his burns and radiation exposure, living until 2010 at age 93. The Japanese government officially recognized him as a survivor of both bombings in 2009, making him the only person certified to have survived both atomic attacks. Antarctic endurance epic. 28 men survived 22 months stranded on Antarctic ice after their ship was crushed, then completed an 800-mile open boat journey across the world's most dangerous ocean. Ernest Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition became trapped when pack ice crushed their ship Endurance in October 1915, leaving the crew camped on floating ice floes with limited supplies. When the ice began breaking up in April 1916, the crew launched 3 small lifeboats and sailed for 6 days through treacherous seas to reach uninhabited Elephant Island. Shackleton realized no rescue would find them there, so he took 5 men in the strongest lifeboat on an 800-mile journey to South Georgia Island. They navigated by sextant through the world's roughest seas for 17 days. Shackleton then trekked 36 hours across South Georgia's unmapped mountains to reach a whaling station, where he organized a rescue mission back to Elephant Island. All 22 men left behind had survived on a diet of seals, penguins, and seaweed for 4 months. The entire crew was rescued without a single death on August 30th, 1916. Outback survival on insects. An Australian man survived 71 days alone in the remote Tanami Desert by eating frogs, lizards, and insects after being abandoned without supplies by men who had offered him work. Ricky McGee was driving from Brisbane to Port Hedland in January 2006 when he accepted a ride from strangers who claimed to have work for him. Instead, they drugged him, stole his money, and left him unconscious beside a remote dirt track. McGee walked for days searching for help, but found only endless red sand and sparse vegetation in temperatures exceeding 115 degrees Fahrenheit. He discovered a small dam that provided muddy water and learned to catch frogs with his bare hands, eating them raw along with grasshoppers, ants, and small lizards. He built a shelter from branches and bark, sleeping during scorching days and foraging at night. After 10 weeks, McGee had lost half his body weight and could barely walk when 2 cattle station workers found him on a remote track on April 6, 2006. He weighed just 105 pounds, down from his normal 230, and suffered from severe malnutrition and infected wounds. McGee made a full recovery, and his survival became legendary in Australia. The 47-story window washer. A professional window cleaner survived a 500-foot fall from the 47th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper when his scaffolding collapsed, suffering multiple fractures but making a near-complete recovery. Alcides Moreno was working with his brother Edgar on December 7, 2007, cleaning windows at the Solo building when their aluminum scaffolding suddenly gave way. Edgar fell to his death, but Alcides somehow rode part of the scaffolding down. Moreno crashed through a wooden fence and landed on a small plot of dirt and construction materials rather than concrete pavement. The impact broke his ribs, arms, legs, and spine in dozens of places, collapsed both lungs, and caused severe internal bleeding. Emergency responders found him conscious but critical, with injuries doctors said should have been instantly fatal. Surgeons performed multiple operations to rebuild Moreno's shattered bones using metal plates and screws, while he spent weeks in intensive care fighting for his life. Against all medical expectations, he survived and gradually regained the ability to walk with assistance. Moreno's survival defied physics calculations, showing that falls from such heights are 99.9% fatal. Solo hurricane survival at sea. A 23-year-old sailor survived 41 days alone on a crippled yacht in the Pacific Ocean after Hurricane Raymond killed her fiancé and destroyed most of their navigation equipment. Tammy Oldham Ashcraft was sailing from Tahiti to San Diego with fiancé Richard Sharp in September 1983 when they encountered the Category 4 hurricane 1,500 miles from land. The storm's 140-mile-per-hour winds and 50-foot waves dismasted their yacht and swept Sharp overboard to his death. Ashcraft regained consciousness after 27 hours to find the boat's cabin flooded, the engine dead, and all electronic navigation equipment destroyed. She jury-rigged a makeshift sail from torn canvas and used a sextant and watch to navigate by celestial positioning, having learned basic navigation from Sharp. With limited food and water, she rationed supplies while hand-steering the damaged boat toward Hawaii. After 41 days at sea, Ashcraft spotted land and was rescued by fishermen near Hilo, Hawaii, having navigated 1,500 miles using only stars and dead reckoning. She had lost 40 pounds and suffered from severe dehydration, but made a full recovery. Ashcraft's story became the book Red Sky and Morning and the 2018 film Adrift.
12-year-old ocean survivor. A 12-year-old French girl became the sole survivor of Yemenia Flight 626 when the Airbus A310 crashed into the Indian Ocean, clinging to wreckage for 13 hours despite not knowing how to swim well. Bahia Bakari was flying with her mother from Paris to Moroni, Comoros on June 30, 2009, when the aircraft crashed during its final approach in rough weather and darkness. All 152 other passengers and crew died in the impact. Bakari found herself in choppy seas, holding onto a piece of the aircraft's fuselage, fighting exhaustion and panic while waves repeatedly pushed her underwater. She had never learned to swim properly, but managed to stay afloat by clinging to debris and kicking her legs. Throughout the night, she called out for her mother and other survivors, but heard no responses from the darkness. After 13 hours in the water, a French military helicopter spotted Bakari and lifted her to safety with only minor injuries and hypothermia. Search teams recovered 24 bodies but never found her mother among the victims. Bakari's survival made international headlines as she became one of the youngest sole survivors of a major aviation disaster. Record-breaking ocean castaway. A Chinese sailor survived 133 days alone on a life raft in the South Atlantic Ocean after his merchant ship was torpedoed by a German U-boat, setting the world record for longest survival at sea by a single person. Poon Lim was serving as second steward aboard the British merchant vessel Ben Lomond on November 23, 1942, when German submarine U-172 sank the ship 750 miles east of the Amazon River. He was the only survivor among the 55-man crew. Lim's initial provisions included water, biscuits, and chocolate designed to last only a few days, forcing him to develop ingenious survival techniques. He caught rainwater in a canvas tarp and learned to fish using hooks fashioned from biscuit tin springs and nails, using dried bird meat as bait. When sharks attacked his catch, he learned to kill them with his bare hands, drinking their blood for fluid. Brazilian fishermen rescued Lim on April 5, 1943, near the mouth of the Amazon River, finding him in remarkably good condition, despite losing 20 pounds. The British Royal Navy studied his survival methods and incorporated them into life raft training manuals for future sailors. Lim's 133-day record stood as the longest solo survival at sea until it was broken in the 1970s.